Folks, welcome back. This is Rachel, the IVC OER librarian. These are one-shot takes where I'm basically reading through slides and walking you guys through some concepts. It's a lot of me reading the slides at you to explain some of this content, which can be very dry and boring, and adding some additional context. These are shot in one take, just to give you guys some demos and some updated content. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm going to walk through these slides. This one is Creative Commons licensing for beginners. How do you choose one? How do you remix with them? How do you control them? And a practical guide. If I speak too fast, feel free to slow the video down. These will all be on YouTube, as the slides will also be around. And all of this content exists in asynchronous formats in the Do-It-Yourself LibGuide and the faculty toolkit. So why does licensing matter? This is so essential. For it to be an OER, it must be under Creative Commons license. This means that it is legally reusable. Without it, others cannot safely use it. It could be considered copyright infringement. It's extremely dangerous. If you are getting paid to make a ZTC class out of OER materials, what you are building must be an OER deliverable under some sort of Creative Commons license. And that's part of the reason that this is so important, is you need to understand what you are giving up when you put your content under a Creative Commons license. A license tells people that they can, whether or not they can copy it, share it, redistribute it. Can they revise it and remix it without it being plagiarism? Can they adapt it? Can they use it commercially and charge people money for it? Can they require the same license, or can they adapt it with different licenses? So Creative Commons is a permission slip that you are giving to all of your fellow educators, as well as, depending, to everyone in the world. Okay. It allows creators to keep your copyright while giving very, very clear public upfront permission on how people can use it and not use it. Okay. It does not erase or transfer copyright. It is always your content. You created that content, you authored it, it's yours. What it does do is explain to others the specific permission without them having to reach out to you and ask you if they can use it. Okay. There are 4 building blocks to a Creative Commons license. There's the by. This is the attribution. This is actually giving you credit as the original creator if you write something from scratch. SA, this is share alike. This means that anybody else who's using the content, must share it under the same license as the original. NC, this is the one that I think is very important. This is non-commercial. This work may not be used for commercial purposes. And ND, no derivatives. This is no changes or adaptations are permitted. This one is not considered a true OER. It might be very, very important though. Say you're talking about someone's lived experience. Say you're talking about an indigenous narrative or a minoritized community that has these narratives. You may not want those being pulled apart in some way, and they may need to be an anthology of non-derivative content that people are allowed to use it however they want, but they can't clip it apart and change it because you want to protect those stories and protect those narratives. So when it comes to attribution basics, like you're going to link out to an attribution or you're using somebody else's content, okay, you're looking at TASL, the tassel, okay? You're going to put the title of the work, the author who created it, the source with the URL where you found it, and the license. This is absolutely essential. If you're adapting the work, you would put changes were made from, and then put title, author, source, and license. If you're using LibreText, there's a thing at the bottom that you can copy and paste and do that with. If you're remixing within LibreText, they will do that for you automatically if you're remixing within them. If you're doing it in a Word document, you will be obligated to do this manually. All right, the share alike, non-commercial, and non-derivatives. So share alike, this keeps future adaptations under the same exact license. It promotes the open education ecosystem, but limits license flexibility. Okay, non-commercial. This is the one that honestly, as much as I hate to say it, this is the one I recommend for everybody, because you don't want, I don't want someone to be able to take my content that I put my sweat and blood into and then charge money for it when I gave it away for free. So if it is just under a CC BY, that means that anybody can take that content and then they could put it up, package it up, and sell it, and you don't get any money from it, but they get money off of it. So this one to me seems like it's the most, if you don't have it on there, it can be the most harmful because it can limit reuse in educational context or publishing context, but you don't want anyone making money off of your content. So personally, I'm a big fan of the NC. A lot of people really like just the essay. The Chancellor's Office recommends just CC BY because that's going to give the most downstream options for remixing. ND, non-derivative, like we mentioned, this allows sharing, but it blocks all remixing and adaptation. So you could make basically an anthology where they're separate sections put together, but you can't remix it in any way. This is not a true OER, but it could be helpful if you're trying to protect specific, more sensitive narratives. Avoid ND whenever possible because it even prevents translation. And that's what we don't want. We don't want to be able, like, we want to be able to translate it into other languages. And we want to be able to update it if there's new content that's found out. So say we find out a new narrative related to a narrative, we would like to be able to add to that content to make sure that it's accurate. All right. There's a Creative Commons license spectrum. Okay. So at the very, very bottom, you've got the CCO or CC BYs. Okay. These are, you got public domain down at the bottom, no rights. Public domain, you can really do whatever you want with. Okay. CC BY, this is the one that the Chancellor's Office recommends because then downstream it's easy. This means they just have to give you credit. Share alike, and then you have, it goes up from there. Non-commercial, then you've got non-commercial, and you can combine some of them all the way until you get to non-derivatives and then non-commercial non-derivative. So they get harder and harder and harder and harder and harder. These last two up here at the top, ND and CND, these two are not really considered OER anymore. You've gone in a different direction at that point because they're so closed off, they're not even open anymore. Personally, I tend to be somewhere in the middle here, somewhere between the CC BY SA, CC BY NCSA, somewhere in there. Okay. So these are the most open ones. These are the ones that people recommend for OER, as long as you don't care if people are going to make money off of it. They're the easiest to use and the most OER friendly. There we go. All right, CC BY SA and CC BY NC, these are the two that most faculty feel the most comfortable with. They prevent commercial use and they must be used under the same license. It's still a lot of OER, but it just means that no one's making money off of it. CC BY NCSA, this is a little bit more restrictive, right? It means non-commercial and must be used under the same license. ND and CND, these are the most restrictive and they're not usually considered OER at that point. So beginner rule, avoid ND because that means that like we can't translate it into different languages and we need to be able to translate it. It also means that we're going to struggle with accessibility versions. So the IBC OER committee cannot pay you if you put it under an ND. However, anything other than that, as long as it's an OER, is considered an OER. Localizing, we want to be able to remix them. We need to be able to adapt them and improve them over time, and we can't do that if it's an ND. All right, free is not the same as open. Please be aware that if you have content online that you're like, oh, I'm going to use this in an OER, that could be copyright infringement. Be very, very careful. You cannot just take anything online just because it's free and use it. You cannot legally copy stuff unless it is under a Creative Commons license or public domain. You cannot redistribute things unless it's under a Creative Commons license or public domain. So please be very careful about that. If something is fair use, that doesn't mean you can use it in an OER. Collections versus remixes. So there is a huge difference between a collection of works where they're each separate and put together. When you hear me say an anthology, that's usually what I mean. Versus remixing, which is basically like you put everything together in a pot, like you're baking something and you make something new out of it. And this is the one where people usually feel like it's plagiarism, but it's not. As long as you are giving credit to the original authors, you are allowed to change their text, mix it together. Basically, you're making a completely new book from it. Here's some examples. So a Canvas module can include a CC BY video, a CC BY NC article, a public domain poem, and it may link out to copyrighted content through a library database. This leads to a ZTC course. It is a combination of different licenses, though, within that one module. Remix example. This is where you basically take a book, you copy and paste the content together if the license is comparable and compatible. Okay. You can't just borrow different ones together, though. Your licenses must be compatible. All right. So simple rule for collections. Each item keeps its own license. Each item has proper attribution. So think of like each chapter. Say you want to do a reader. You're pulling a whole bunch of different content together, right? You must follow each individual's rules. You are not implying one license covers the whole thing. This would be like an anthology. you are not altering any of the ND materials. So this is what basically LibreText does at the paragraph level for you. If you're doing it in a Word document, you have to manually do it. And if you're making an anthology, each one just has to have a separate section. Think of doing like a separate reference at the end of each chapter or at the end of each page. So it's a separate thing that you're doing and you're not combining them. Simple rules for remixing. Can these materials legally be combined? Does anything require share alike? Can the final product carry one license or do you have to have multiple licenses? Does anything prohibit commercial use or derivatives? License compatibility. This is where it gets really, really, really confusing and people often just want to cry and stick their head in a wood chipper. All right. The most common sources of licenses conflict. ND, you can't really do anything with it other than make anthologies or readers. Mixing NC and non-NC content is really, really hard to do. Okay. SA conflicts and unknown licenses really conflicts. You just got to be really, really careful. So ND is a huge stop sign. You got to be really, really careful. You cannot remix this. You cannot adopt it. You cannot modify it. You cannot translate it, which is, in my mind, the biggest problem against ND. So please be careful not to put it under an ND license. Okay, SA and NC, these are pretty common in the OER, especially with the way that we have predatory commercial textbooks taking the CC BY content now. A lot of people are doing an SA and NC content. Personally, if I put anything under, I like to do a non-commercial license. That seems to be the one that I like the most, personally, for me, when I'm faculty writing content. All right, easier license combinations. The more simple your license, the easier it is to remix. And this gets very, very confusing very fast. CC BY can be mixed with anything. A CC BY NC can only be mixed with CC BY NC, or CC BY NCSA content. It can be a little bit confusing. So what not to combine, okay? If you have a CC BY NSA with a CC BY NCSA, anything with an ND, unknown licenses, internet images, please be careful. Just because it's on the internet does not mean you can use it. And NC content is something that you plan to license non-commercially. So if the license doesn't work together, you can link out to them. You can keep them separate in a collection rather than a single work. You just have to be really, really careful about this and ask the copyright holder if they're willing to put a slightly different license on it. So license stacking, this is what LibreText does. And this is what a lot of people in books do, where basically you have the different sources next to one another. It's legal, but it's really hard to navigate for future users. Like if someone else wants to do it. So like say chapter text is under CC BY, but then the image is a public domain. And then you have activities under CC BY, and then you link out to a video, and then you link out to some art. It gets very confusing, but this is actually very, very common in the OER world, is license stacking. All right. One clear license is easier, so whenever possible, try to do a single. You want to be able to remix it, translate it, print it, upload it to repositories, and maintain it long term. So LibreText is one of my favorite digital online repositories. They do paragraph level licensing, and you will actually see in their back matter for every single one of their books, they track the licensing. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of the reasons I recommend using LibreText and LibreText Remixer, because they will really track a lot of this licensing for you, so you don't have to worry about it. LibreText does not remove any author responsibility, though. You are still responsible for looking at what you copied, what you changed, what you're licensing, and whether the final works can apply legally. Other platforms don't track the licensing for you, so please be very, very careful and understand that you are responsible for that. Make sure that you are tracking what the sources are, what you're linking out to, what changes you made, what it appears in your work, and any final compatibility notes. If everything is your original work, you get to choose a license. So this actually happens quite a bit. I have people reach out and say, hey, I wrote my own content. Which one do I want to use? I recommend the CC BY NC or the CC BY SA one usually. Often what you'll see long term is the CC BY NC SA. That's a very common one that often everything ends up kind of being at that. But once you're there, it makes it a little bit harder. So if you remix existing OER, you may not get to choose the license. You may be under whatever it is before you got there. So common outcomes, if it's CC BY plus other, it's usually still CC BY. CC BY plus NC must be a CC by NC. CC by SA must be a CC by SA. CC by NCSA remix must be a CC by NCSA outcome. And this is where you can start combining some of them, but some of them are incompatible. So please be careful about that one. That's a really confusing one down towards the end. And a CC by ND cannot be remixed or adapted. Images are often a huge problem. This is one of the things where a lot of people, they think they want to author from scratch. They get the text done and they're like, it's good. And it's like, it's not good until you got all the images and the graphics and the infographics. So make sure that you are either creating your own images, you're using AI to help you generate images, or you are creating your own images, or you're finding things like Creative Commons images that have ability to be adapted and used, and that you are actually telling us which one it is, right? Is the adaptations allowed? Do you have a verified source? If it is AI generated, it's similar to public domain because you can't copyright AI generated images. Attributions and exception pages. So make sure that your OER includes a dedicated attribution and exemption pages. You want to have a full list of all your licenses, author names, sources that you used, image credits. Some people do this at the end of every page. Some like to do it at the end of every chapter. Some like to do it for the full book. I recommend at least at the end of each page and having it for the entire book. Oh, and this is a very, very common one. You'll see this a lot. Except where otherwise noted, this work is under, and then you can name something. So if for some reason you are doing license stacking, where you're using public domain images and some AI generated images and some other things, you might want to just put, except where otherwise noted, this work is under A, and then list the Creative Commons license you're using. So beginner workflow. Decide, are you authoring, remixing? Are you adapting? What are you doing? And this often requires a needs assessment for your class. You're going to track your sources while you use them. Think about the same way that we teach our students when you're referencing different content and citing different content, you have to track it. Check your licenses, make sure that you have the permission to do that and that you have a final attribution for everything. Final takeaways. Creative Commons licensing is not just paperwork. It's what makes OER possible. It's what makes it legally shareable, adaptable, and sustainable. Use Creative Commons sources, avoid ND if you can, prefer compatible licenses, and document everything. And a final disclaimer, I am not a copyright librarian. I am not a copyright lawyer. I am an OER librarian who does this kind of content regularly. So when you have problems, reach out to someone and ask. So here is a cheat sheet. There are these all over the line. If you just type in Creative Commons license compatibility, you will get something that will tell you whether or not you can remix with them. You will notice that the CC by NC can be combined and remixed, and it shows you. This is an easy, quick sheet on how to do that. So I recommend making sure that you are looking on whether or not your licenses can be remixed. This has been an entry-level guide to Creative Commons licenses. Reach out to a librarian if you have more questions.